There was once a time when South African Airways stood tall, the golden carrier of a nation rising into the threat age. With the world-class service, a growing national network, a fast-growing economy in the country, and one of the most modern fleets in Africa, SAA, also known again as South African Airways, represented prestige and pride. But over the decades, that pride turned into pain, mounting debt, political interference, and repeated bailouts drove the airline eventually into the ground. This is the story of how South African Airways fell and what's left after their crash. The story begins in 1934. South African Airways was born from Union Airways and quickly became the flag carrier for the nation of South Africa. By the 1950s and 60s, it was expanding fast, operating aircraft like the Lockheed Constellation, the Boeing 707, and later the Boeing 747 SP, perfect for long African routes. Despite apartheid isolating South Africa politically, SAA found creative routes to maintain international operations, often flying long, indirect journeys due to airspace restrictions. The airline was efficient, admired, and even luxurious, but beneath the product service, trouble was brewing. The golden years to the political burden. The 1990s brought democracy and optimism, a new South Africa, a new chance for SAA to reconnect with the world, South African Airways. The airline modernized, acquiring A340s and Boeing 737s, and joined Star Alliance in 2006, a major milestone for any airline, any African airline here. Later, they started acquiring A350s and A320s, but the A350s were very short-lived. But behind the scenes, the airline was struggling. Years of government control and political appointments began to erode professional management. Corruption, poor financial oversight, and overexpansion plagued SAA. In the early 2000s, the airline passed massive losses, over 14 billion in just few years. I assume that's South African currency. And instead of fixing the structure, the government kept bailing out the fall. By the 2010s, South African Airways was collapsing under its own weight. Between 2007 and 2020, the airline received over 50 billion in bailouts, money that could have built schools, hospitals, and even transportation infrastructure. Each new CEO promised reform. Each government minister claimed it could be turned around, but nothing changed. The worst came under chairperson Demise, a political appointee close to former President Jacob Zuma. Under her leadership, contracts were mismanaged, planes were grounded, and international routes were slashed. By 2019, SAA was bankrupt in all but name. Flights were delayed, staff unpaid, and public confidence evaporated. Collapse and bankruptcy. In December 2019, South African Airways entered business rescue, the equivalent of bankruptcy protection. Then COVID-19 hit. The pandemic was the final nail in the coffin, as they say. The government stopped funding operations and the airline ceased almost all flights. After 86 years, the flag carrier of South Africa was gone. Its entire long-haul fleets, the iconic A340s even, were grounded and later sold off for almost nothing. Thousands of employees were laid off, and what remained of the airline went up for sale. The afterlife. In 2021, a partial rebirth was announced. The government sold 51% of SAA to a private consortium called Takatso Aviation. But progress has been slow, and the deal itself became controversial, raising questions about transparency and fairness. Today, indeed, it's true that South African Airways operates just a handful of domestic and regional routes, using at least A320s and a single A330. Far from its former global glory, now competes with new private regional airlines like Lyft and Fly Safari, both more agile, modern, profitable, and new. So what went wrong? The fall of South African Airways wasn't just a single political event. It was decades of poor leadership and political interference. An airline that once connected the continent became a political tool. And when politics runs an airline, profit is again replaced by patronage. For South Africans, SAA became a symbol of washed potential. And yet many still hope it can rise again. Not as a government toy, but as a true airline run by professionals, for passengers and for pride. Conclusion. South African Airways taught the world a painful lesson that even the most iconic airlines can collapse in the modern day and age when corruption outweighs competence. But maybe, just maybe, the phoenix can rise once more. Again, for now, SAA's name still flies, but it's a shadow of what it once was. SAA. From national burden to national... No, damn it. From national pride to national burden, this was the Demise of South African Airways.